The dust had barely settled from the stagecoach wheels when Penelope Davis realized she had made the most catastrophic mistake of her entire 22 years of existence. Her fingers clutched the worn leather handle of her carpetbag so tightly that her knuckles had turned white, and through the grime-covered window she could see the man who had paid for her passage from Pennsylvania standing on the platform with his arms crossed. Everything about him radiated disapproval, from his narrowed eyes to the tight line of his mouth. This was supposed to be her fresh start, her escape from the suffocating grief that had consumed her since her parents died in the factory fire 6 months ago. Instead, she felt like she was stepping into a different kind of prison. The driver opened the door with a theatrical flourish, and the hot Colorado air hit her face like a physical blow. It was June of 1876, and Cherry Creek was experiencing what the locals would later call the hottest summer in recent memory. Penelope's heavy traveling dress, appropriate for the cooler climate she had left behind, now felt like a woolen cage. Miss Davis. The man on the platform had a voice like gravel scraping against stone. He was perhaps 50 years old, with graying hair and a paunch that suggested too many years of good meals and little physical labor. His name was Harold Simpkins, and he owned the general store. Their correspondence had been brief and businesslike. He needed a wife to help with the store and provide him with sons. She needed security and a roof over her head. Love had never entered the equation. Penelope stepped down from the coach, her legs trembling so badly she nearly stumbled. The tears she had been holding back since leaving Philadelphia finally began to spill down her cheeks. She tried to wipe them away quickly, mortified at showing such weakness, but they kept coming. Everything she had left behind, everyone she had loved, the grave she would never visit again, all of it crashed over her in that moment. "I do not tolerate crying women," Harold said coldly, making no move to help her with her bag. "If you are going to be hysterical, you can get back on that coach right now." The words hit her like a slap. The other passengers were staring. Townspeople had stopped their business to watch the spectacle, and Penelope wanted nothing more than to disappear into the dusty ground beneath her feet. "The lady just traveled over 1,000 miles. The voice came from behind Harold, deep and steady and somehow soothing despite its roughness. "Maybe you could give her a minute to catch her breath before you start laying down laws." Penelope looked up through her tears to see a man stepping forward from where he had been leaning against the post outside the general store. He was tall, probably in his mid-20s, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that needed a trim. His clothes were work-worn, a simple cotton shirt and denim pants tucked into scuffed boots, but he wore them with an ease that spoke of a man comfortable in his own skin. His eyes, a startling shade of hazel that caught the afternoon light, were fixed on her with an expression of such genuine concern that Penelope felt her breath catch. "This is none of your concern, Nathan Ingram," Harold said sharply. "This is between me and my intended." Nathan's jaw tightened, but he did not look away from Penelope. "You are not married yet, which means she has every right to change her mind." He took another step forward, his movements slow and deliberate like he was approaching a frightened animal. "Miss, my name is Nathan Ingram. I work the ranch just outside town. I do not know your situation, but if you need some time to think things through, my aunt runs the boarding house 2 streets over. She would be happy to give you a room for a few days, no strings attached." "She signed a contract," Harold sputtered. "I paid her passage, which I am sure she can repay if she chooses to," Nathan said mildly, though there was steel beneath the gentle tone. "But right now, she looks like she needs kindness more than she needs a husband barking orders at her." Penelope stared at this stranger who had materialized out of nowhere to defend her. No one had shown her genuine kindness since before her parents died. Her aunt, who had taken her in after the fire, had made it clear that Penelope was a burden. The women at the church had clucked their tongues sympathetically but offered no real help. Harold's letters had been cold and transactional, but this man, this cowboy she had never met, was looking at her like she mattered. She started, her voice hoarse from crying and dust. I do not know. You do not have to decide anything right now, Nathan said. His voice was remarkable, she realized. It had a quality that made you want to keep listening, a warmth that seemed to wrap around you like a blanket. But maybe take an hour, have some water, wash the travel dust off. Then see how you feel. Harold's face had turned an alarming shade of red. If you walk away now, do not expect any second chances. I will write to the agency immediately and demand a refund, and you will be stranded here with nothing. The threat should have terrified her. Penelope had exactly $3.40 to her name, but something in Nathan's steady gaze gave her courage she did not know she possessed. Then I suppose I should go to that boarding house, she heard herself say. Harold made a sound of disgust and stormed back into his store, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. The gathered crowd began to disperse, already gossiping about the scandal. But Nathan just smiled, a real genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes and reached for her carpet bag. May I? He asked, waiting for her nod before taking it. Come on, Miss Davis. Let us get you somewhere you can breathe. Penelope followed him on shaking legs, acutely aware that she had just thrown away her only plan for survival on the word of a complete stranger. But as they walked down the dusty main street of Cherry Creek, past the saloon and the blacksmith and the small church with its white painted steeple, she felt the tightness in her chest begin to ease. Your aunt really would not mind, she asked quietly. Aunt Miriam. She would be delighted. She has been after me for years to settle down, so she will probably see you as a potential project. Nathan glanced at her with a hint of humor in his expression. Fair warning, she is going to ask you about 100 questions and probably try to feed you enough food for 3 people. She shows love through cooking. That sounds wonderful, Penelope said and meant it. When was the last time someone had tried to feed her, had fussed over her, had cared whether she was comfortable? The boarding house was a neat 2-story building painted a cheerful yellow, with flower boxes in the windows and a wide porch that wrapped around the front. A woman in her 50s emerged as they approached, wiping her hands on her apron. She had the same hazel eyes as Nathan and the same warm smile. Nathan, what have you brought me? She called out. Aunt Miriam, this is Miss Penelope Davis. She just arrived from Pennsylvania and needs a place to stay for a few days while she sorts some things out. Can you help? Miriam Ingram took one look at Penelope's tear-stained face and travel-worn dress and immediately swept her into a motherly embrace. Oh, you poor dear. Of course, you can stay as long as you need. Come inside, I just put coffee on, and I have some apple cake that needs eating. Penelope felt fresh tears spring to her eyes, but these were different. These were tears of relief, of unexpected mercy. She let herself be shepherded inside, into a clean, bright parlor that smelled of lemon polish and fresh bread. Nathan followed with her bag, setting it down gently by the stairs. I will leave you ladies to get acquainted, he said. Miss Davis, if you need anything, the Ingram Ranch is about 3 miles west of town. Anyone can give you directions. Wait, Penelope said impulsively. Thank you. I do not know what would have happened if you had not spoken up. Nathan's expression grew serious. Harold Simpkins is known for having a mean streak. I have seen how he treats his store clerks, always finding fault, always threatening to dock their pay. When I heard he had sent for a mail-order bride, He paused, choosing his words carefully. I hoped whoever came would be strong enough to handle him, or smart enough to see through him before it was too late. And if I had married him, Penelope asked, then I would have hoped you would know you had friends in town if you ever needed help. He tipped his hat to both women. Ladies, I will take my leave. Aunt Miriam, I will be by Thursday for supper like always. After he left, Miriam led Penelope upstairs to a small but immaculately clean room with white curtains and a patchwork quilt on the bed. A pitcher of water and a basin sat on the dresser, and there was even a small vase with wildflowers on the windowsill. Now you wash up, and then come down and have some food, Miriam said firmly. After that, you can tell me the whole story if you want, or you can keep it to yourself. Either way, you have a safe place to sleep tonight. Alone in the room, Penelope sank onto the bed and let herself cry properly for the first time since leaving Pennsylvania. She cried for her parents, for the home that no longer existed, for the fear that had driven her to answer Harold Simpkins' advertisement. But she also cried with relief, because somehow, impossibly, she had been saved from what would surely have been a miserable marriage. And the man who had saved her, Nathan Ingram, with his kind eyes and steady voice, had asked for nothing in return. Downstairs, after she had washed her face and changed into a fresh dress, Miriam served her coffee and cake as promised. The cake was delicious, rich with cinnamon and chunks of apple, and Penelope realized she had barely eaten in the 3 days of travel. Nathan is a good man, Miriam said, settling into the chair across from her. His parents died when he was 16. Fever took them both within a week of each other. He could have fallen apart, could have sold the ranch and squandered the money. Instead, he worked harder than any man I have ever known. He built that ranch up from almost nothing, and now he runs one of the best cattle operations in the territory. He seems very kind, Penelope said carefully. Kind, stubborn, and too focused on work for his own good, Miriam said with obvious affection. He is 26 years old and has not seriously courted a woman in years. Says he is too busy, but I think he is just waiting for the right person. She gave Penelope a speculative look. What are your plans, dear? I do not mean to pry, but if you have broken your agreement with Harold, you will need some way to support yourself. Penelope had been trying not to think about that. I can sew, she offered, and I can read and do figures. I worked in my father's shop before. She swallowed hard. Before the fire. What kind of shop? Stationery and books. We sold writing supplies, journals, novels, newspapers. Father loved books more than anything. The memory was bittersweet. Mother always said he married her because she could quote Shakespeare. Miriam's eyes lit up. Can you keep accounts? Manage inventory? Yes, I did all of that for Father. Why? Because the school teacher, Mrs. Chen, has been looking for someone to help manage the new lending library the town council approved. It does not pay much, but it would be honest work, and you could live here for a reasonable rate until you get on your feet. Hope fluttered in Penelope's chest. Do you really think she would hire me? I think we should go talk to her tomorrow morning and find out. Miriam reached over and patted her hand. One way or another, dear, we will figure this out. You do not have to marry a man you do not love just to survive. That night, lying in the comfortable bed with the windows open to catch the evening breeze, Penelope thought about Nathan Ingram. She barely knew him, had spent perhaps 10 minutes in his presence, but he had changed the entire course of her life with a few simple words. He had seen her distress and stepped in, risking the disapproval of a prominent businessman to help a stranger. What kind of man did that? The next morning, Miriam was true to her word. After a hearty breakfast of eggs and toast, they walked together to the small schoolhouse at the edge of town. Mrs. Grace Chen was a petite woman in her 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She interviewed Penelope for nearly an hour, asking about her experience, her education, her references. "I will be honest, Miss Davis," she finally said. "The pay is not generous. $15 a month to start, with the possibility of more if the library proves successful. The work involves cataloging books, helping patrons find what they need, keeping records, and organizing community reading events. It is not glamorous." "It sounds perfect," Penelope said sincerely. Books had always been her sanctuary, her escape. The idea of spending her days surrounded by them felt like a gift. "Then the job is yours if you want it. You can start Monday." Mrs. Chen smiled for the first time. "Welcome to Cherry Creek, Miss Davis. I hope you will be happy here." Walking back to the boarding house, Penelope felt like she was floating. She had a job, a place to stay, and the beginnings of a new life that she had chosen for herself. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "I told you it would work out," Miriam said smugly. "Now, let us go to the general store and get you some fabric. You will need at least 2 more dresses if you are going to be working in town." Penelope's stomach dropped. "Harold's store." "Harold's store is the only place in Cherry Creek that sells fabric," Miriam said firmly. "But do not worry. I will be right there with you, and Harold Simpkins knows better than to cause trouble with me. My late husband was the county judge, and people in this town have long memories." The store was busy when they entered, several women examining bolts of cloth while Harold rang up purchases at the counter. He saw them immediately, and his expression darkened, but he said nothing. Miriam marched Penelope straight to the fabric section and began pulling out options. "This blue would look lovely with your eyes," she said, holding up a bolt of cotton printed with tiny flowers. "And this brown would be practical for work." They selected fabric, thread, and buttons, along with a few other necessities. When they brought everything to the counter, Harold rang it up in stony silence. Just as Penelope was counting out her precious coins, the door opened and Nathan walked in. "Morning, Miriam, Miss Davis," he said pleasantly. "Harold." Harold grunted in response. Nathan's eyes took in the fabric and supplies, and understanding crossed his face. "Getting settled in?" he asked Penelope. "Yes, thank you. Mrs. Chen offered me a position managing the new library." "That is wonderful news." His smile was genuine, warm. "The town needs a good library. There are not enough places for quiet around here. Some of us have work to do instead of standing around gossiping," Harold muttered. Nathan ignored him entirely. "Miss Davis, I was wondering if you would like to see the ranch sometime. We have a new batch of foals that are quite entertaining, and my aunt is right that I could use some civilizing influence. She seems to think I have forgotten all my manners." Miriam made a sound that was suspiciously like a laugh covered by a cough. Penelope felt her cheeks warm. Was he asking to court her, or just being friendly? "I would like that very much," she said, deciding that his intentions did not matter as much as the fact that she genuinely wanted to see him again. There was something about Nathan that made her feel safe, seen in a way she had not felt in months. "Sunday afternoon, then. I will come by around 2 if that suits." Sunday would be perfect. After they left the store, Miriam was practically vibrating with excitement. "I knew it," she said. "I knew the moment he brought you to my door. Nathan has never invited a woman out to the ranch." "Not once. We barely know each other," Penelope protested, but she could not quite suppress her own smile. "Sometimes that is all it takes. One look, one moment, and you know." Miriam linked her arm through Penelope's. "My husband proposed to me after knowing me for exactly 2 weeks. We had 43 years together before the fever took him, and I would not trade a single day." The week passed in a blur of activity. Penelope started at the library, which was really just 2 rooms in the back of the schoolhouse, filled with donated books in desperate need of organization. She threw herself into the work, creating a cataloging system, repairing damaged spines, and arranging everything by subject and author. It was satisfying work, the kind that showed visible progress each day. She also began to learn the rhythms of Cherry Creek. The town had been established during the Colorado Gold Rush 20 years earlier and had evolved from a mining camp into a proper community. The population was perhaps 300 people, a mix of ranchers, farmers, merchants, and the families they supported. The main street boasted a bank, a saloon, a hotel, the general store, a blacksmith, a doctor's office, and a dressmaker. There was also a telegraph office and a small newspaper printed weekly. The people were friendly, if curious about the woman who had rejected Harold Simpkins. Penelope quickly learned that Harold was not well liked. His prices were considered too high, his manner too brusque, and there were rumors that he had driven his first wife to an early grave through sheer unpleasantness. Several women made a point of telling Penelope she had made the right choice, which was both comforting and mortifying. By Sunday, she was simultaneously eager for and nervous about Nathan's visit. She borrowed a dress from Miriam, a soft green cotton that fit reasonably well after some quick alterations. She pinned her dark blonde hair up carefully, leaving a few curls loose to frame her face. "You look beautiful," Miriam said approvingly. "Nathan is not going to know what hit him." Nathan arrived promptly at 2, driving a small wagon rather than riding horseback. He had clearly made an effort with his appearance as well, wearing a clean white shirt and a dark vest, his hair neatly trimmed. "Miss Davis," he said, helping her up onto the wagon seat. "You look lovely." "Thank you, and please call me Penelope." "Penelope." He said her name carefully, like he was savoring it. "Then you should call me Nathan." The ranch was beautiful, a sprawling property with rolling grassland and a creek running through it. The house was modest but well built, a log structure with a wide porch and a stone chimney. The barn and outbuildings were all in good repair, and everywhere she looked, Penelope could see signs of hard work and careful management. "This is wonderful," she said honestly. "You must be very proud." "It is a good life," Nathan agreed. "Hard sometimes, especially in winter, but good. Come on, let me show you those foals I mentioned." In the barn, 3 gangly foals were nursing from their mothers while a 4th lay sleeping in the hay. Nathan moved among them with easy confidence, running his hands over their legs to check for any problems, speaking to them in a low, soothing voice. "That one there, the bay with the white star, I am thinking of calling her Phoenix," he said, pointing to one of the nursing foals. She was born during a thunderstorm that nearly burned down the barn. Lightning struck the oak tree out front, and for a few minutes, I thought we were going to lose everything. But we got lucky. The rain came hard enough to put out the fire, and she came into the world right in the middle of it all. "Phoenix," Penelope repeated. "Rising from the ashes, that is a good name." Nathan looked at her thoughtfully. "My aunt told me a little of your story about the fire and your parents. I hope you do not mind." Penelope shook her head. "It is not a secret." Factory fires are common enough in Philadelphia. The building was old, the owners had cut corners on safety. 43 people died. Her voice caught slightly. "My parents were just 2 of them." "I am sorry," Nathan said simply. "Losing parents, it changes you. Makes you grow up faster than you should have to." "You understand," Penelope said, grateful that he did not offer empty platitudes or try to tell her it would get better with time. "I do." He was quiet for a moment, stroking Phoenix's neck. "After my parents died, I was angry for a long time. Angry at God, at the world, at them for leaving me. My aunt helped, but mostly it was the work that saved me. Getting up every morning and tending to the animals, fixing fences, mucking stalls. There is something about physical labor that helps settle the mind. I found that with books, Penelope said. When things got too hard, I could disappear into a story and be someone else for a while. What do you like to read? They talked for over an hour, sitting on hay bales in the barn while the horses drowsed around them. Penelope discovered that, despite his rough exterior, Nathan was surprisingly well-read. His mother had been a teacher and had instilled in him a love of learning. He had a small collection of books in the house, classics mostly, and he read them over and over when work allowed. "I do not get to town often enough to use the library properly," he admitted. "But maybe now that you are running it, I will have more incentive to visit." Penelope felt her heart skip. "You would be welcome anytime." He showed her the rest of the ranch, the chicken coops and the vegetable garden, the cattle grazing in the far pasture, the creek where he liked to sit in the evenings. Everywhere they went, he told her stories about building up the herd, about learning to break horses, about the time a rattlesnake got into the kitchen and his aunt had killed it with a broom. "She did not speak to me for a week because I laughed," he said ruefully. "Said I should have been grateful she saved my life instead of mocking her technique." By the time he drove her back to town, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Penelope could not remember the last time she had felt so content, so at peace. "Thank you for today," she said as they pulled up in front of the boarding house. "It was exactly what I needed." "Can I see you again?" Nathan asked. "Maybe take you to supper at the hotel next Saturday? I would like that very much." He helped her down from the wagon, his hands warm on her waist. For a moment they stood close enough that Penelope could smell the scent of hay and soap on him, could see the gold flecks in his hazel eyes. Then he stepped back, tipping his hat. "Until Saturday, then." Miriam was waiting in the parlor, trying and failing to look like she had not been watching out the window. "Well," she demanded, "how did it go?" "It was wonderful," Penelope said, unable to keep the smile off her face. "He is wonderful." "I told you," Miriam said triumphantly. "I knew the moment I saw you two together. Mark my words, Penelope Davis, you are going to be my niece before the year is out." "We have only spent one afternoon together," Penelope protested, but her heart was not in it. Something had shifted today, something fundamental and terrifying and thrilling. She had come to Cherry Creek expecting to enter a loveless marriage of convenience. Instead, she was falling for a cowboy with kind eyes and a gentle heart. The week until their supper date seemed to crawl by. Penelope threw herself into her work at the library, which was beginning to attract regular visitors. Mothers brought children for story time, which Penelope had started hosting twice a week. Men stopped by to read the newspapers. Older residents came to check out novels and discuss literature. One of her regular visitors was a young woman named Sarah Mitchell, who was engaged to one of the ranch hands that worked for Nathan. Sarah was friendly and talkative, and she seemed delighted to have a new friend her own age. "Nathan is a good man to work for," she told Penelope one afternoon. "My James says he is fair with wages and treats everyone with respect. Some of the other ranchers around here, they act like their hands are property instead of people. But not Nathan." "He does seem very decent," Penelope said, trying to sound casual. Sarah laughed. "The whole town is talking about you too, you know. Everyone saw him pick you up last Sunday, and Mrs. Patterson at the hotel already has you married off with 3 children." Penelope felt her cheeks heat. "That is absurd. We are only just getting to know each other." "Maybe," Sarah said with a knowing look. "But I have known Nathan Ingram my whole life, and I have never seen him look at a woman the way he looks at you. Like you hung the moon." On Saturday evening, Nathan arrived in his wagon, dressed in what were clearly his best clothes. He had even shaved and gotten his hair trimmed again. Penelope wore the new blue dress she had finished sewing, and Miriam had helped her arrange her hair in an elegant updo. The hotel dining room was the nicest restaurant in Cherry Creek, which was not saying much by Philadelphia standards, but the food was good, and the atmosphere was pleasant. The owner, a gregarious man named Mr. Williams, seated them at a corner table with a view of the street. "This is my first real date in years," Nathan admitted after they had ordered. "I am probably going to make a fool of myself." "That makes two of us," Penelope said. "I never did much socializing back home. Father kept me busy with the shop, and after he died." She trailed off. "You do not have to talk about it if you do not want to," Nathan said gently. "No, I think I do want to." Penelope took a breath. "After the fire, I went to live with my aunt. She made it very clear that I was a burden, that she was doing me a great favor by taking me in. Every day, she found new ways to remind me that I was costing her money, eating her food, taking up space. I started looking at mail-order bride advertisements because I could not stand it anymore. Harold's letter was the first one that seemed even remotely acceptable." "I am glad you did not marry him," Nathan said quietly. "Not just because I am selfish and want to get to know you better, but because you deserve so much more than a man who would treat you like a piece of property he purchased." "I did not think I deserved anything," Penelope admitted. "I felt like I was drowning, and Harold was a lifeline, even if it was not a very good one." Nathan reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was calloused from years of ranch work, but his touch was gentle. "You deserve everything, Penelope. You deserve kindness and respect and someone who sees how remarkable you are." She felt tears prick her eyes again, but these were good tears. "How can you see that? You barely know me." "I know enough," Nathan said. "I know you are brave enough to travel 1,000 miles to start over. I know you are smart enough to walk away from a bad situation even when you were scared. I know you are kind, because I have watched you with the children at the library, and I have seen how patient you are with the older folks who come in. I know you make my aunt happier than she has been in years. And I know that when I look at you, I feel something I have not felt in a very long time." "What is that?" Penelope whispered. "Hope," Nathan said simply. Their food arrived, breaking the intensity of the moment, but Nathan did not let go of her hand right away. When he finally did, Penelope felt the absence of his touch like a physical loss. They talked through the entire meal, about everything and nothing. Nathan told her about his dreams for the ranch, about wanting to improve his breeding stock and maybe expand into horse training. Penelope told him about her idea to start a book club for the women in town, and about how much she loved working with the children. After supper, he walked her back to the boarding house, taking the long way around so they could enjoy the evening air. Cherry Creek was beautiful at night, the main street lit by oil lamps, the stars brilliant overhead without the haze of city smoke. "I have been thinking," Nathan said as they walked slowly down the quiet street, "and you can tell me if this is too fast or if I am overstepping. But I would like to court you properly, Penelope. I would like to see where this goes between us." Penelope's heart soared. "I would like that too, even though I am just a cowboy who smells like horses most of the time." "Especially because you are a cowboy who smells like horses," Penelope said, and was rewarded with his wonderful smile. At the boarding house door, Nathan hesitated, clearly working up the courage for something. Finally, he leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to her cheek. It was brief and chaste, but it sent warmth flooding through Penelope's entire body. "Good night, Penelope," he said softly. "Good night, Nathan." Inside, Miriam was waiting with hot cocoa and an expectant expression. Penelope told her everything, from the dinner conversation to the walk home to the kiss on her cheek. Miriam listened with a satisfied smile. "I knew it," she said again. "I knew you two were meant for each other. Nathan has not been this happy since before his parents died." "You are good for him, Penelope." "He is good for me too," Penelope said. "I feel like I can breathe again, like there is a future worth looking forward to." Over the next several months, Nathan and Penelope settled into a comfortable pattern of courtship. He came to town every Sunday after church, and they would spend the afternoon together, sometimes walking, sometimes having dinner, sometimes just sitting in the boarding house parlor and talking. On Wednesdays, Penelope would ride out to the ranch in the wagon Nathan left for her at the livery stable, and she would help him with small tasks while they talked about their days. The town watched their romance bloom with approval. Even Harold Simpkins seemed to have accepted defeat, though he still glared at both of them whenever they crossed paths in his store. Penelope did not care. She was happier than she had been in years, possibly ever. By October, the leaves on the cottonwood trees along the creek had turned gold, and the air had taken on the crisp edge of approaching winter. Penelope had been in Cherry Creek for 4 months, and she could barely remember the sad, frightened woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in June. That woman felt like a stranger now. One Wednesday afternoon, Nathan picked her up from the library in his wagon, looking nervous in a way she had not seen since their first date. "I want to show you something," he said. "At the ranch." During the drive, he was quieter than usual, and Penelope could sense he had something important on his mind. When they arrived at the ranch, instead of heading to the barn as they usually did, he led her around to the back of the house. "I have been working on this in my spare time," he said. "It is not finished yet, but I wanted you to see it." Behind the house, where there had been only a small vegetable garden before, Nathan had built an addition. It was framed out and partially sided, with large windows that would let in plenty of light. "What is it?" Penelope asked, though she already suspected. "A library," Nathan said. "I thought, if things go the way I hope they will go between us, you might like to have your own space for books. It would be private, quiet, a place where you could read or work on the town library projects. There is room for shelves on all the walls, and I am going to put in a fireplace so it will be warm in winter." Penelope felt tears spring to her eyes. "Nathan, this is too much." "It is not enough," he said earnestly. "Penelope, I know we have only known each other a few months, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I love your kindness and your intelligence and the way you scrunch up your nose when you are thinking hard about something. I love that you are patient with children and animals, that you can quote Shakespeare, that you make the best coffee I have ever tasted. I love that you understand what it is like to lose everything and have to start over." He took both her hands in his. "I want to marry you if you will have me. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to build a life together, raise children together, grow old together. I know I am not fancy and ranch life can be hard, but I promise I will do everything in my power to make you happy." "Yes," Penelope said through her tears. "Yes, Nathan, of course I will marry you. I love you too. I think I have loved you since that first day when you looked at me like I mattered." Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "You matter more than anything," he said into her hair. "You are my whole world, Penelope." He kissed her then, properly this time, and Penelope felt like she was flying. This was what love was supposed to feel like, she realized. Not the desperate transaction she had almost entered with Harold, but this warm, consuming joy that made everything brighter. When they finally broke apart, Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple gold band with a small diamond. "It was my mother's," he said. "My father gave it to her when they got engaged. If you do not like it, we can get something different." "It is perfect," Penelope said, slipping it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. They were married 6 weeks later, on a cold November morning in the small church at the edge of town. Penelope wore a cream-colored dress that she and Miriam had spent weeks sewing, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Sarah Mitchell and her new husband James stood up with them, along with Miriam, who cried through the entire ceremony. The whole town turned out for the wedding, filling the church to capacity. Even Harold Simpkins came, though he sat in the back and left immediately after the ceremony. Penelope did not care. She only had eyes for Nathan, who looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "I, Nathan Ingram, take you, Penelope Davis, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part." When it was Penelope's turn, her voice shook with emotion but did not falter. "I, Penelope Davis, take you, Nathan Ingram, to be my lawfully wedded husband. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part." The Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, and when Nathan kissed her, the congregation erupted in applause. The celebration afterward was held at the boarding house, which Miriam had decorated with fall flowers and ribbons. There was food and music and dancing, and Penelope felt surrounded by love and warmth. These people, who had been strangers just a few months ago, had become her community, her family. Late in the afternoon, Nathan whisked her away in the wagon, now decorated with tin cans, and a sign that read, "Just married, courtesy of some of the ranch hands." They drove out to the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. "Welcome home, Mrs. Ingram," Nathan said, helping her down from the wagon. "Mrs. Ingram." Penelope tried the name out in her mind and found she loved it. She was no longer Penelope Davis, the orphan with no prospects. She was Penelope Ingram, wife of a good man, member of a community, woman with a future full of possibility. That night, in the house that was now her home, Nathan was gentle and patient with her nervousness. He took his time, treating her like she was made of spun glass, and when they finally came together, it was with tenderness and love. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, Penelope felt a peace she had not known was possible. "Are you happy?" Nathan asked, stroking her hair. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be," Penelope said honestly. "Thank you for seeing me that day, Nathan. Thank you for speaking up when you did not have to." "I would do it 1,000 times over," he said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Penelope." Their first winter together was hard but joyful. The snow came early and heavy, and there were days when they were snowed in, unable to even make it to the barn. But Nathan had prepared well, with plenty of firewood and supplies, and Penelope found she did not mind being trapped inside with her husband. They read to each other by the fire, cooked meals together, talked about their dreams for the future. Nathan finished the library edition, and Penelope spent hours arranging her books and the ones Nathan had bought her as a wedding gift. It was her sanctuary, just as he had promised, a space that was entirely her own. In the spring, Penelope discovered she was pregnant. Nathan was overjoyed, immediately becoming even more protective and attentive than he already was. He worried constantly, making sure she did not lift anything heavy, that she ate enough, that she rested. "I am pregnant, not made of porcelain," Penelope laughed, but she was touched by his concern. Their son was born on a warm August evening in 1877, with Miriam and the doctor in attendance. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Penelope was sure she could not go on. But Nathan stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, encouraging her, and when their son finally entered the world with a lusty cry, he wept. "He is perfect," Nathan said, cradling the tiny infant with surprising confidence. "Absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas, after Nathan's father, and he was indeed perfect. He had Nathan's hazel eyes and Penelope's blonde hair, and from the start, he was a happy, easy baby. Penelope had never known love could expand the way it did when she looked at her son. She loved Nathan with her whole heart, but Thomas opened up entirely new chambers she had not known existed. The years that followed were full and rich. Penelope continued to manage the town library, bringing Thomas with her when he was small and leaving him with Miriam when he got older and more rambunctious. Nathan's ranch continued to prosper, and he hired more hands, including James Mitchell as his foreman. When Thomas was 3, they had a daughter, Emily, who had Penelope's green eyes and Nathan's dark hair. 2 years after that came another son, Henry, who was the spitting image of his father. Their family grew and thrived, and the house that had once seemed so empty was now filled with noise and laughter and love. Penelope never forgot the terrified woman she had been when she stepped off that stagecoach. Sometimes, late at night when everyone else was asleep, she would think about how different her life might have been if Nathan had not spoken up that day. If she had married Harold Simpkins out of desperation, if she had never known what real love felt like. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked one such night, pulling her closer. "Just how lucky I am," Penelope said. "How one moment, one choice changed everything." "I am the lucky one," Nathan countered. "You could have chosen to get back on that stagecoach and go anywhere, but you stayed." "I stayed because you gave me a reason to," Penelope said. "You saw me when I felt invisible. You offered kindness when I expected nothing. You made me believe I deserved to be loved." "You have always deserved to be loved," Nathan said firmly. "I am just grateful I got to be the one to do it." As the children grew older, Penelope and Nathan made sure they knew the story of how their parents met. Not the sanitized version, but the truth of it, about their mother's desperate flight from grief, about their father's courage in standing up to a bully, about how sometimes the worst moments in life lead to the best ones. "So if you had married that other man, we would not exist?" Thomas asked when he was about 10, his young mind trying to wrap around the concept. "That is right," Penelope said. "Which is why I will always be grateful to your father for giving me the courage to make a different choice." "Father is the bravest person I know," Emily chimed in loyally. Nathan laughed and ruffled her hair. "Your mother is the brave one. I just spoke a few words. She is the one who had to take the risk, to trust a stranger, to start a completely new life in a place she had never been." The town of Cherry Creek grew and changed over the years. The railroad finally came through in 1885, bringing new people and new opportunities. The library expanded into its own building, a beautiful space funded by donations from the community. Penelope became the head librarian, a position she held with pride and joy. Harold Simpkins eventually remarried, a widow from Denver who seemed to manage him better than anyone expected. He mellowed somewhat with age, though he and Nathan were never friends. Still, they reached a sort of détente, able to conduct business civilly if not warmly. Miriam lived to a grand old age, dying peacefully in her sleep at 82. Her last years were spent doting on her great nieces and nephews, and she never stopped reminding everyone that she had known from the start that Nathan and Penelope were meant to be together. As Penelope and Nathan grew older, their love deepened and matured. The passionate romance of their early years mellowed into something richer, a partnership built on decades of shared experiences, challenges overcome together, and joys multiplied by having someone to share them with. Thomas grew up to be a fine rancher, taking over more and more of the daily operations as Nathan's knees began to trouble him. Emily became a teacher like her grandmother, marrying a lawyer from Denver and splitting her time between the city and Cherry Creek. Henry, the youngest, surprised everyone by becoming a writer, publishing novels about the West that became quite popular. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Nathan took Penelope back to the spot where he had first brought her to the ranch, where the library addition now stood. It was fall again, the cottonwood trees golden, the air crisp and clear. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Staying here instead of going to some big city where you could have had more opportunities?" "Never," Penelope said without hesitation. "This is exactly where I was meant to be. With you, with our children in this community. I found myself here, Nathan. I found everything I did not even know I was looking for." "I thank God every day for that stagecoach," Nathan said. "For your courage, for the chance to love you, for the life we have built together." By the time they celebrated their 25th anniversary in 1901, they were grandparents 3 times over, with more grandchildren on the way. The ranch was still thriving under Thomas's capable management. The library had become one of the finest in the territory, with Penelope's reputation as a librarian drawing visitors from surrounding communities. But Penelope's greatest source of pride was not the professional success, or the prosperous ranch, or even the wonderful children they had raised. It was the simple fact that she had built a life based on love and courage, that she had taken the terrifying leap of faith required to start over, and it had led her to everything she had ever wanted. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Penelope asked Nathan one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset. Their children and grandchildren were inside, the house full of noise and warmth. "Your very first words to me." "I said the lady just traveled over 1,000 miles, and maybe Harold could give you a minute to catch your breath," Nathan recalled with a smile. "Why?" "Because that was the moment everything changed," Penelope said. "I was crying, terrified, sure I had made the biggest mistake of my life. And then you spoke up, and you saw me as a person who deserved basic human decency. Those words made my tears stop because they gave me hope. They made me realize I did not have to accept whatever life handed me. I could choose something better." Nathan took her hand, his touch as warm and reassuring as it had been that first day 25 years ago. "Best decision I ever made, speaking up. Second best was asking you to marry me." "What was the best?" Penelope asked with a smile. "Kissing you at our wedding," Nathan said, pulling her close. "Because that was when I knew for absolute certain that I was the luckiest man alive." The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow as life always does. They lost friends, saw children struggle and triumph, weathered droughts and harsh winters and all the challenges that come with living. But through it all, they had each other. On their 30th anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration at the ranch. 3 children, 7 grandchildren, and what felt like half the town filled the property. There was music and dancing and a massive feast prepared by the community. As Penelope looked around at all the people who had come to celebrate with them, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This life, this family, this love, it had all started with one moment of kindness from a stranger who became her everything. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Emily asked, coming to stand beside her mother. "I was just thinking about how blessed I am," Penelope said. "How one decision, one moment of courage led to all of this. You and Father have always been my model for what love should look like," Emily said softly. "The way he looks at you even after 30 years, the way you still reach for his hand, the way you work together like you are two parts of one whole. That is what I wanted with Daniel, and that is what I hope my children find someday." "The secret," Penelope said, "is choosing someone who sees you, really sees you on your worst day and loves you anyway. Your father saw me at my lowest point when I was frightened and alone and crying in the street. And instead of judging me or taking advantage of my vulnerability, he offered me kindness." As the sun began to set on their anniversary celebration, Nathan found Penelope and drew her into a dance, despite the fact that the music had stopped and people were beginning to leave. "What are you doing?" She laughed. "Dancing with my wife," he said simply. "The way I have wanted to do since the moment I first saw you. You did not want to dance with me when you first saw me," Penelope teased. "You wanted to rescue me from Harold Simpkins." "I wanted to dance with you," Nathan insisted. "But rescuing you seemed more urgent at the time." They swayed together in the fading light, surrounded by their family and the life they had built together. Penelope rested her head on Nathan's shoulder, feeling his heartbeat steady and sure beneath her cheek. "I love you, Nathan Ingram," she said. "Today, tomorrow, and always." "I love you, Penelope Ingram," he replied, more than words could ever say. The years moved into the new century, bringing changes and challenges neither of them could have imagined. The automobile arrived in Cherry Creek, causing great excitement and no small amount of chaos. Electric lights came to town, and then telephones. The world was changing faster than ever before, but some things remained constant. Nathan's love for Penelope never wavered. Her devotion to him never faltered. They grew old together with grace and humor, their hair turning gray, their steps slowing, but their partnership as strong as ever. When Nathan's health began to fail in his late 60s, Penelope was by his side constantly. She read to him from his favorite books, held his hand through the nights when pain kept him awake, and made sure he knew every single day how much he was loved. "I am not afraid," he told her one evening, his voice weak but certain. "I've lived a good life, loved a wonderful woman, raised fine children. I have no regrets, Penelope." "You cannot leave me yet," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I am not ready." "You are the strongest woman I have ever known," Nathan said. "You will be fine. And I will be waiting for you, however long it takes." But Nathan rallied, as he had done many times before, his stubborn strength and Penelope's devoted care pulling him back from the brink. The doctor said it was remarkable, that by all rights Nathan should not have recovered. But Penelope knew better. Nathan was not ready to leave yet. He had more grandchildren to meet, more sunsets to watch, more moments to share with the love of his life. They made it to their 40th anniversary, surrounded by an even larger family than before. 4 children, 12 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren gathered to celebrate the couple who had become legendary in Cherry Creek for their enduring love story. "Tell us the story again," one of the great-grandchildren begged. "About how you met." So Penelope told it, the story that never got old no matter how many times it was repeated. She told them about stepping off the stagecoach in tears, about Harold Simpkins and his cold demands, about the cowboy who had stepped forward to defend a stranger. "And what were Grandpa's first words?" the child asked, though she clearly already knew. "He said I had traveled 1,000 miles and deserved a minute to catch my breath," Penelope said, smiling at Nathan. "And just like that, my tears stopped, because I realized I was not alone. There were still good people in the world, people who cared about what was right." "Best decision I ever made," Nathan said, his voice rusty with age but still warm with love. "Speaking up that day changed my whole life." "Changed both our lives," Penelope corrected. They lived to see Cherry Creek grow from a small frontier town into a proper city, with paved roads and a hospital and a high school. The ranch remained in the family, passed down through Thomas's children. The library that Penelope had built from almost nothing became a cornerstone of the community, eventually named the Ingram Public Library in honor of her decades of service. On a warm summer evening in 1916, as Penelope and Nathan sat on their porch watching yet another sunset, Nathan turned to her with a smile. "40 years," he said. "40 years since I first saw you step off that stagecoach. You were the most beautiful, most terrified thing I had ever seen. And I knew right then that my life was about to change." "I knew it too," Penelope admitted. "The moment you spoke up for me, I felt something shift, like the universe was telling me to pay attention, that this person mattered." "You gave me everything, Penelope," Nathan said. "A home, a family, a reason to be grateful for every single day. I cannot imagine what my life would have been without you." "Then it is good you spoke up when you did," Penelope said, squeezing his hand. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from orange to pink to purple, the stars beginning to emerge. Inside, they could hear their great-grandchildren playing, their laughter floating out through the open windows. "We did well," Nathan said finally. "Built a good life, raised good children. I am proud of us, Penelope." "So am I," she said. "So am I." Nathan passed away peacefully in his sleep 6 months later at the age of 70, with Penelope by his side holding his hand. The entire town turned out for his funeral, sharing stories of his kindness, his integrity, his dedication to family and community. But the eulogy that mattered most came from Penelope, who stood before the crowded church with tears streaming down her face and told them all what Nathan had meant to her. "He was my savior," she said simply, "in the most literal sense. He saved me from a terrible mistake, offered me hope when I had none, and loved me with his whole heart for 40 years. He made me believe I deserved to be happy, and then he spent the rest of his life making sure I was. I will miss him every day for the rest of my life, but I will never regret a single moment we had together. He was, and always will be, the love of my life." Penelope lived for 10 more years after Nathan's death, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She continued to work at the library almost until the end, finding comfort in the books that had always been her refuge. But everyone knew that a part of her had died with Nathan, that she was just waiting for the day when she could join him again. On a cool October evening in 1926, Penelope passed away quietly in her sleep, in the house Nathan had built, in the bed they had shared for 40 years. She was 72 years old, and she left behind a legacy of love and courage that would echo through the generations. At her funeral, her children and grandchildren shared their favorite stories. Emily told about how her mother had taught her to love books and learning. Thomas talked about her strength and wisdom, how she had been the steady compass that kept the family grounded. Henry read from one of his novels, a love story loosely based on his parents' romance. But it was one of the great-grandchildren, a girl of about 8, who perhaps captured it best. "Great-grandma told me once that the bravest thing she ever did was get off a stagecoach when she was scared," the little girl said. "But I think the bravest thing was staying, choosing to build a new life in a place where she did not know anyone. That is real courage. And that is what I will remember about her." Penelope and Nathan were buried side by side in the Cherry Creek Cemetery, under a large cottonwood tree that turned gold every fall. Their shared headstone bore a simple inscription: "Together in life, together in eternity." A love story that began with courage and kindness, and never ended. The Ingram Ranch continued to thrive for generations, passed down through the family with the same care and dedication that Nathan had shown. The library that Penelope had built from nothing remained a vital part of the community, a testament to her belief in the power of books and education. And the story of the mail-order bride who stepped off the stagecoach trembling, and the cowboy whose first words made her tears finally stop, became a cherished part of Cherry Creek's history. Years later, when descendants would visit their graves, they would see the cottonwood tree overhead and remember the love story that had started with one moment of courage, one choice to offer kindness to a stranger, one decision to believe that something better was possible. And they would know that true love, the kind that lasts beyond death, is built not on grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but on everyday moments of choosing each other, of seeing each other truly, of offering grace and receiving it in return. Penelope Davis had stepped off that stagecoach in 1876, expecting nothing but a loveless marriage of convenience. Instead, she had found Nathan Ingram, who saw her when she felt invisible, who offered her hope when she had none, whose first words to her were a gift of simple human decency that changed the entire course of her life. And in finding him, she had found herself. She had discovered that she was stronger than she knew, braver than she believed, and deserving of a love that would span decades and generations. She had built a life of purpose and meaning, raised children who carried her values forward, and created a legacy that would endure long after she was gone. The terrified young woman who had arrived in Cherry Creek that hot June day would barely have recognized the confident, beloved matriarch that Penelope became. But every bit of that transformation started with Nathan's simple act of kindness, his willingness to stand up for what was right, his ability to see not what Penelope was in that moment, but what she could become with someone who truly saw her worth. Their love story was not one of instant passion or dramatic rescue, though it had elements of both. It was a story of two people who met at exactly the right moment, who chose each other day after day for 40 years, who built something beautiful and lasting out of courage and kindness and steadfast devotion. It was a reminder that sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with a grand gesture, but with a simple one: someone seeing another person's pain and choosing to help, no questions asked, no reward expected. And it was proof that even in our darkest moments, when we are trembling and afraid and sure that nothing will ever be right again, there is still hope. There are still good people in the world who will speak up, who will offer us a chance to catch our breath, who will see our worth when we have forgotten it ourselves. Nathan and Penelope's story lived on in their children and their children's children, in the ranch that still bore the Ingram name, in the library that continued to serve the community, and in the hearts of everyone who had ever heard the tale of the mail-order bride and the cowboy who loved her. It was a story of the American West, of courage and new beginnings, but most of all, it was a love story the best kind, the kind that proved that sometimes, against all odds, everything works out exactly as it should.